Hello, and welcome to this month's edition of My Life in Art, your monthly arts show sponsored by the Prescott Area Arts and Humanities Council, Prescott's oldest arts advocacy organization, founded in 1974. My Life in Art, on a monthly basis, profiles notable artists in the community, and this month's guest is a man who needs no introduction, but I'm giving him one anyway, Andrew Johnson Schmit. Welcome, Andrew.
Good to be here.
Good to have you. Andrew, you have done so much in this community over the years, I don't know where to begin. You're a organizer, an event organizer, a producer, a filmmaker, and I'm a radio personality. Well, first, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you come to Prescott and become involved in the artistic scene?
Well, I'm originally from Chicago, and my wife and I, through a series of unfortunate events, ended up in Prescott. But when we got here, I always like to be involved with the arts, kind of ADHD kind of creativity. And first thing I was involved with actually was the Access Channel.
Very good.
Because my background had been in film, and did that for a while, was on the board. And then it's a very Prescott thing. If you want to get something done with the arts, you find somebody who's already busy, and I was always busy, so I was always getting invited. Participated in Tsunami on the Square, Performing Arts Festival, from the very beginning when it started off as people at a potluck.
Yeah, that was quite a long time ago.
Did that for 15 years. And just, one arts thing after another. I just, always something interesting to do.
Well, Tsunami on the Square is, of course, has been very prominent. It was very popular. Tell us a little bit more about how that came about.
Well, that came about because there was a fellow named Jay Ruby who lived here in Prescott, and all artists end up having 1 or 9 day jobs.
Yes, they do.
To pay for their habit of doing art. And he was a caregiver working with people with developmental disabilities at a company where I was an administrator. And he invited me to potluck with a bunch of other people who were interested in the arts. And we all brought our hot covered dish in a tiny little apartment.
Wow.
And we all got in the door, and then he locked it behind us, and he said, I think we should have an arts festival, and you're my board.
Wow.
So if I had just begged off on that dinner, I might not have been involved.
Wow. And Tsunami, it just grew and grew over the years, didn't it?
It did. It was a real good example of something that was necessary in its time. There was a lot of performance artists passing through Prescott, and local folks who were interested in doing things, a lot of kids with the stilt walking and the juggling and all the different exotic arts. And like I said, we did it for 15 years, ran circus camps for kids. Thousands and thousands of people came to Courthouse Square to see the show in the third weekend in June. And then we did something which is unusual with an arts organization. We said, we just can't grow this anymore. We filled the square, and you can't have a tsunami on the square off the square.
No, you can't.
So we decided to just close it up and say that was a wonderful 15 years. We hope we inspired people to try something else.
Well, hey, you can't complain about a 15-year run, huh?
Well, F. Scott Fitzgerald said that the thing about Americans is they don't have a second act.
Right.
And we kind of wanted to do that, just to close it in a way that gave it a nice shape.
And another thing you have been involved with that had or has quite a following has been the Coyote Radio. Tell us a little bit about that and how it came about.
Well, like I said, my background was in film.
Yes.
When I moved to Prescott, and I'd gotten burnt out. Filmmaking used to be very, very expensive and hard to get the equipment and hard to organize. And now the equipment is much more portable and it's cheaper.
Right.
So, I mean, right now, every kid in Prescott's got a cell phone with a video camera in his pocket.
Yes.
Back then, it was a lot harder. So when I moved here, I said, let's do something that's easier to do, and we thought of radio theater. And KJZA was interested in us hosting a show. So we organized, myself and a bunch of friends. Christian Smith was one of our writers, and just lots and lots of actors over the years. We did that for about 8 years. Did a lot of shows. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it kind of led into Prescott Arts Beat too, didn't it?
Well, Prescott Arts Beat, the radio show that I do on the Prescott Public Radio, that was actually founded by J.T. Tanous, who was the executive director of the Smoke Eye Museum.
Wow.
And he wanted to do it, and he asked me to come along as kind of like a color commentator. So I did that.
And he picked the right person.
Well, within a year or so after that, he moved up to Flagstaff to run the Coconino Center for the Arts.
Right.
And I just stuck it out. So it's been 13 years now.
That's good. That's good. And you've done so much, I hardly know where to go next. You, of course, are now... you've been making movies locally, Dead Vote Society, the upcoming Witch Child film. Tell us how you started becoming a filmmaker again in this area. Well, first, what was your background in film that you said you had? Yeah,
I originally came from Chicago, where I'd done a bunch of film there, shorts and that kind of thing, and crewed on larger things. And I had given it up when we moved to Prescott because, like I said, it was expensive, it was difficult to do, and I said, well, I'm just not going to do that. And then when we were in Prescott, as we were coming to the end of Tsunami on the Square, my wife Angie said, what would you like to do? What would make you happy now that you're going to have some of your life back? And I don't know why, but out of the blue, I said I'd like to make a movie again. And what I found when I started poking around was that the equipment was a lot cheaper and easier to get a hold of now, more portable. So we made Dead Vote Society, kind of a parody of politics in Arizona.
Right.
If you can imagine, it is possible.
And that is on YouTube now, isn't it? So people who are watching this can find it there.
Yep. And so we made that film. We took it around to the festivals, ended up taking it to, I want to say 7 festivals, from California through the Southwest. And then that led to doing a web series, and after the web series led to other projects. Witch Child was our first feature, which we did with Kickstarter crowdfunding. That's in post-production. All these projects have been interesting because they're not just taking stuff that we know and doing them.
Yes.
What we find out is there's tons of stuff we don't know.
Right.
And so we end up having to, kind of like the teacher who has to keep one day ahead of their students on a subject. We're always learning how to do a technique and then doing it. We have the advantage nowadays that there's so many tutorials out there. On YouTube, you can go there and look how to use some sophisticated software and then turn around and use it. So that's been our process.
Now, Dead Vote Society, it was a satire. It was about zombie voters. How long did it take you to write the script for that?
Well, that had started its life out as a Coyote Radio theater sketch that we had done live at the Hotel St. Michael Ballroom 4 or 5 years before. And we took that and we ripped it apart and rebuilt it visually because some jokes work in radio that won't work visually. So we rebuilt that, and the actual writing took maybe 3 weeks.
Oh, that's pretty good. And Witch Child is in post-production. That's a feature, I understand.
Sure is.
You tell us a little bit. You did the funding through Kickstarter. I think the filming is an interesting story. You were just camped out for like 2-3 weeks out in the middle of the desert
Yep.
with
Yep.
no amenities or
No.
how was that?
It was challenging. Everyone who went through it, our crew down there totaled probably about 32 people, something like that. We will all keep it in our hearts, like going into the Army. You know, you have that. We knew that we wanted to have some exotic locales that showed off Arizona as a production value. And there's stuff that's closer to town, but the beauty of shooting in the middle of no place is you don't have a lot of planes going overhead.
Right, and this was down around Congress, wasn't it?
Right, just outside of Congress, Arizona, there's a ranch down there that we shot on. The people were very nice.
Very good.
And like I said, we didn't have problems with planes going overhead. There was no problems with radio frequencies, which sometimes can be a problem for lavalier microphones. In fact, we couldn't even get the cell phones to work. So it was pretty much out in God's extra dirt.
Yep, and I seem to recall it rained on you quite a bit, didn't it?
We foolishly or smartly, we shall find out, said we'll shoot during the monsoons because it's during summer break, and we could get kids, and the skies would have some really interesting clouds. It was true, but what happened was the first time monsoon came in, we were all standing there around our gear, and we said, oh, look, there's a cloud wall coming at us. That'll make an interesting background.
Yep.
And it was like watching in slow motion as a truck came at you. It blew over equipment. It was a nightmare on its own.
Wow, and which child is a horror film?
It's straight up supernatural horror.
All right, and any estimated time when we will get to see it?
Well, I always like to say when it's ready, it'll be done.
I understand. So at this point, we will take a short break. This is My Life in Art with our guest, Andrew Johnson Schmit. I'm Parker Anderson. We will be back in just a moment. Welcome back to My Life in Art. I'm your host, Parker Anderson, and we are talking with our guest, Andrew Johnson Schmit. And we've been talking about the many, many different things he has done in Prescott, and I think we've only scratched the surface. There have been some projects that you've started on that ended up, for whatever reason or another, not lasting as long. I'm thinking of, in particular, you tried organizing the Bucky Awards for a while, and that ran about 3 years, I think.
Yep.
Tell us a little about that. I actually kind of liked those.
I always enjoyed it. I had been, for a short time, a reporter on the Prescott newspaper, on the Courier, and it's farm league papers out in the eastern part of the county. And people that I would talk to at PAC were like, yeah, we'd rather not do an awards show because we feel that it's a small enough art scene and some people will feel left out. And I always thought, yeah, that's true, but there's nothing that makes people more strive than the possibility of recognition.
Right.
So I turned it around in my head a couple years and I thought, you know what we're doing? We're celebrating the work of a certain artist. We're not saying they're the best. We're just celebrating their personal excellence.
Yes.
And we used online survey as a voting source. And people would vote for who they liked, get it to a short list, and then take it to people who worked in that particular art form in town to help us narrow that down to one person to celebrate. And so I put that all up on the internet. The neat thing about it is because it has all the names of everyone who got nominated, it still gets tons of hits.
Wow.
This years later. We did at the Hendricks Auditorium the first year, and then after that at the Elks, and then at the Prescott Center for the Arts. It was always a fun night.
Oh, yes.
But it was the kind of thing that, one person really shouldn't carry that. And again, I felt like if people were inspired by it, they would take it up. And if they weren't, then there's always other projects.
Yep, absolutely. Speaking of the Elks Opera House, I know for a few years you did Fright Night around Halloween too. That was always a fun event.
Oh yeah, there's no better theater that I can think of in Arizona to do a Fright Night show than the Elks.
Yes.
All the history and the beauty and the Gothic quality.
And Fright Night consisted of showing some one or two old horror movies.
Plus newer stuff that was being done here in Arizona.
I believe one year you did show Dead Vote Society.
We did.
Yes.
I got some wonderful pictures of cast and crew with the movie screening behind them on the big screen. Mm-hmm. It looked really cool.
I've often thought the Elks, which is, like you say, a beautiful facility, I've always had this fantasy that some Halloween they might turn it into a haunted house with have people walk through and with maybe some walls set up and that sort of thing.
I always thought it'd make a great location for a movie, like a Phantom of the Opera type story.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, you've got your hands in so many things. What's next on your horizon other than Witch Child? What are you involved with now?
Well, right now we have just started rolling out a new web series. Mm-hmm. My wife Angie and I were hired by a local actor, mm-hmm. Kevin Goss, mm-hmm. to make a web series based around him. Mm-hmm. He had created a character, mm-hmm. And he wanted to showcase it. So we did, mm-hmm. and has 5 episodes. The first one's already out. Mm-hmm. It's really a jump ahead for us in terms of just the complexity of the project.
Right.
Right now, as we speak, my wife is editing together a transition sequence where his character is talking about he kept auditioning mm-hmm. for different roles and never getting picked.
Right.
And
mm-hmm.
we shot him in front of a green screen mm-hmm. doing various characters, mm-hmm. silly characters. Mm-hmm. And then we also shot people who looked like casting directors who were like,
right.
And then she's digitally composting them together mm-hmm. so that it makes something almost like a Busby Berkeley number.
Right.
So that stuff's been a real challenge on this one, but jumps ahead in mm-hmm. production values. A lot more camera movement. Mm-hmm. We found a lot of really great actors, mm-hmm. amateur actors in our area, and we brought in people from outside. Our problem is that we start running out of crew, mm-hmm. people who are talented and working in the cameras and the music recording and the sound recording and all
right.
that. It's a short list here in Prescott.
Yes, it is.
And that's been a challenge for us. Then after that, in March, we're shooting a pitch video for Project Greenlight. That's a big contest every year for people mm-hmm. who want to make films. And so we'll represent Yavapai County with that.
Very good. I also recall that you were hired as a line producer for that Ride the Thunder movie that was out. Now, tell me exactly how that came about and what a line producer is.
Yeah. Wendy Bridges is our film commissioner mm-hmm. Here in Prescott. We are blessed to have one of the few film commissions in the state mm-hmm. is in Prescott. Most towns don't have one.
Right.
So these filmmakers from Phoenix area had shot a Vietnam War story. Mm-hmm. They had shot the Vietnam footage in Hawaii, mm-hmm. and while they were editing it, they said, we need something for when our soldiers come back mm-hmm. To stateside. Mm-hmm. And they wanted a small town feel, mm-hmm. early 70s, and somebody said, hey, what about Prescott? They contacted mm-hmm. Wendy Bridges, and bless her heart, Wendy said, well, talk to Andrew, mm-hmm. and she named a couple of other people who could do other things. And a line producer in mm-hmm. a big Hollywood production mm-hmm. basically runs everything that happens in the background mm-hmm. at a film set. Mm-hmm. But in this case, because there were so few bodies on the ground, mm-hmm. I basically ran their local operation so that they could bungee into Prescott and make movie for 2-3 days and have it be organized. Like we took Lizard Lounge, tore it apart overnight, rebuilt it as a 1972 era bar, and that's actually a lot harder than it sounds.
I bet it is.
And then we shot it, and then overnight we put it back together as, the way it stands today.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff. It was fun. It was a paying job.
Yeah. So family life. Andrew, you're married.
I am.
Your wife, Angie. How long have you been married?
25 years.
25 years. Congratulations. Children?
No. Just crew members.
Yeah, same here. So let me see. Anything that you've done that we haven't touched on in this interview? You've done so much. Any projects that we haven't gone over?
It just all blurs together at a certain point, doesn't it?
It really does, because I've been around a lot too, and have done quite a few things. So we certainly appreciate your being here today, Andrew, and I think we're wrapping this up a little bit short, but that's okay. So thank you, Andrew, for doing this interview and for all you do in the arts community.
My pleasure.
We're looking forward to Witch Child, and thank you for joining us. This is Parker Anderson on behalf of the Prescott Area Arts and Humanities Council. We wish to thank the Smoke Eye Museum for hosting us. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.